It's the winter months. Seasonal depression is on the rise, and the desire for a partner to keep us company during these trying times is back for its yearly roundup. Now, the majority of you are probably watching this in your room alone. How do I know that? Well, you know what they say, you are what you eat. And also, YouTube statistics tells me everything I need to know. Everything. But it's okay, there's nothing wrong with being lonely. That's why you have me, that's why I'm here, to keep you company. It's a little too close, could you? Yeah, that's better. Loneliness can be good, empowering. Learning to enjoy your own company and be comfortable with your own presence is extremely important. However, more times than not, and especially during this time of year, the loneliness can be tough to deal with. And this intro isn't just me projecting here, all right? This is a fact. This is a statistic. All right, Jesus, get off my ass. But it could always be worse, and I understand that's cliche, but I'm serious. Have you ever felt so lonely, so isolated that you project all of life's problems on women? No? Well, good. You're not an incel. Hold on, sorry. There is one more thing I need to address before the intro plays. Now, previously on the Saji Sharma channel, a rash decision was made. You see, Incel of the Year, Avaneesh Kanala, or the GOAT Avaneesh, had been arrested for criminal stalking and false imprisonment. Now, I have made videos on Avaneesh in the past. However, they were not under the pretense of criminal Avaneesh. They were under the pretense of Incel Avaneesh, who has outlandish takes about women and hates his own skin color. Now, for lack of better judgment and because I wanted to get a video out quickly, I did not properly assess the weight of the topic at hand. The seriousness of the crimes that were committed and the victims that were pained were undermined in my video by my use of slapstick humor that I had become accustomed to when discussing Avaneesh. That is entirely on me, and I apologize to any victims that had felt hurt by this video. It was very much not my intention, and I will do better moving forward when dissecting heavier topics. I'm going to be unlisting that video and leaving the link in the description for those of you that do want to watch it, and also I don't want to delete it to make it seem like I'm running away from my problems. However, the gist of the situation will be discussed in this video, so you don't need to watch both. That being said, I felt like I had to redeem myself a little bit, and on top of that, there was just a lot more that I wanted to say. If you don't know or are new, I first talked about Avaneesh 2 years ago when he was just some internet weirdo spewing bullshit. And that's what he was, this kid who was my age, giving insane, weird takes with his shirt off sometimes. Obsessing over white women and fetishizing Latino women. Constantly putting down his own race and further obsessing with his own image. Now, I could have never predicted or even comprehended the extremes he would go in real life. Seeing this real-life example of what happens when someone, specifically a person of color, falls this far into inceldom is scary. To see someone go through this descent via their social media presence was really interesting, and it very much put things into perspective. This is someone whose brain had been warped by porn, someone who's been so accustomed to European beauty standards that they internalize hate for their own race, someone whose ego is then inflated by numbers on a screen, giving them the confidence to attempt to get away with horrendous actions. Avaneesh went from someone who was projecting their own insecurities by making controversial TikToks to now harassing people in real life. So today I want to break some of this down. I want to discuss how the dynamics of race, involuntary celibacy, and social media coincide. So let's talk about it. This is Indian Incels Online. Before we begin this wretched journey, I am indeed a straight male, and because of that, I can't properly provide the insight needed to adequately assess this video on my lonesome. So today I wanted to bring on some friends to help give some more insightful perspectives on the topic at hand.
Hi, I am Yusra. I go I go as Brown Fireball on YouTube. I am of Pakistani descent.
Her intro was cut out, but it's a good thing I have great memory. This is Rose Ramden. She's Indo-Trinidadian and Hungarian, and is a YouTuber much like myself. So my first question is, do you have any thoughts on incels in terms of their worldview, their beliefs, and how those beliefs may affect both men and or women?
You know, when I think about incels, like, it's sort of like mixed feelings, to be honest, because on the first hand, like, you know, these people are kind of like societal rejects, if you will. First and foremost, you know, how does an incel sort of even think of himself, right? Like, he doesn't have a very high self-esteem, right? Mm-hmm. So for first and foremost, like when it comes to like physical appearance and things like that, he'll be like, okay, well, you know, I don't have that bone structure, you know, that the Chads have out there, or like those attractive men out there, you know, they have. And so it's sort of like, okay, well, you're dealing with a lot of self-esteem issues, right? And then they're going out into the dating market, and it's like very difficult for them to find a date, an attractive person for them, or, like a partner, forget attractive, but just like a partner for them, right? Or someone that's attractive to them, So what ends up happening, and on top of everything else, they're also younger guys, a lot of them. And then this progresses, as they age, right? But when they're young, when they're in high school, for example, right? There's bullying and, a feeling of like isolation and things like that. Like I said, like rejects of society in a way, right? And people don't take them seriously. Yeah. People aren't nice to them, so.
Yeah, I think that incels are predominantly defined by a sort of misanthropic, antisocial, misogynistic worldview that is, I think, foundationally untrue. And I think that a lot of struggles with achieving intimacy are driven primarily by social factors, people having trouble assimilating socially or interacting with people just in everyday scenarios. You're going to have trouble connecting with women if you have trouble connecting with anybody, generally. And because of that, I think the incel circle or the incel community is a very dangerous sort of pipeline, because it takes sort of this disaffected, antisocial, frustrated, dejected attitude, and it channels it into this black-pilled hopelessness that encourages people to take a more reactionary, more extremist, more radical approach to their vitriol for women. It encourages them to view women as enemies who are working against them. It encourages them to dehumanize and to harass and to threaten these people.
For a lot of, the initial feelings that I have towards incels, it's sort of like I have a lot of empathy, because it's not easy. It's not easy out there, right? Like like I said, if you're not attractive, if people aren't treating you very nicely, if you're not being able to fit into society, whether it's friends or overall or with a partner or anything like that, like it's difficult, right? So it's empathy.
Yeah, totally.
But the empathy sort of ends where the hateful, sort of mentality sort of begins, especially when it comes to women, right? Because, you can't blame your lack of success with maybe getting a date or, maybe in general, like, maybe the world is against you in a sort of way, but you cannot, channel that into degrading women, into telling women that, you are the reason that my life is so horrible,
And of course, to some extent, I hold empathy for these people who are caught in these pipelines, who are basically at the very, very lowest of social standings, feel that they have nowhere to go, and the only people who take them in are these reactionary freaks. But at the end of the day, I can't excuse anybody who is acting with such vitriol and misogyny.
So yeah, I think I have like mixed feelings, and I think it's empathy up until where I see an incel just misbehaving and like having a lot of hatred and, rude feelings towards women. I think that's where it sort of switches for me, and then it's a lot less empathy when it comes to that.
Incel, or involuntarily celibate, is a term used to often describe people who are irredeemably and irrevocably lonely. So much so that they tend to weaponize their loneliness and blame the opposite sex for the reason as to why their world is crumbling. Inceldom is treated as an answer for men that don't have anywhere else to go. It's a direct result of our modern day society and patriarchal systems, making it harder for men to find a safe space. Yes, the patriarchy hurts men too. So because of this, certain men have found comfort within incel groups. When you hold in your feelings constantly, you're never coming to terms with your own emotions, which is why instead of rationalizing and thinking logically about why they can't get laid, the incel mindset becomes increasingly easy to latch onto. It becomes this false sense of safety, this parasite or virus that pretends to be your friend, preys on you when you're weak, just to invade the walls of your mind and change the way in which you see life. Avaneesh was a victim of this virus, whether he knew it or not. He made it very clear through his content that he was very lonely and would love comfort from a whiter Latina female. That is a direct quote. It was obvious he was struggling with self-esteem. I mean, very obvious. He was an open book. On top of that, he was constantly getting harassed by audiences and other creators. So to an extent, it's normal to feel pity, to feel empathy for weary travelers that have lost their way, majority of them being children or young adults. But when you take the road less traveled because it helps you direct your resentment towards marginalized communities, that's where I have an issue. You punching down in a system that gives you the advantage is hard to look past. Now today we're going to be going down that road just so we can educate some people and maybe help someone from falling in the pipeline. I'm like your tour guide, and today we happen to be touring the manosphere. Please make sure to stay with the group, because if you get lost, well, Fuck, I'm sorry. Now, I understand the manosphere is confusing to navigate, but of course, that's why I'm here. But when I'm not here and you have to scour the internet by yourself, you're gonna need someplace safe to do that. Well, now that's a lot easier with Opera's desktop browser. Opera allows for a safer and more accessible browsing experience. With features like the ad blocker, you can block ads in a click, or with the VPN feature, you can browse privately without having to worry about websites collecting your information. I actually already had Opera installed on my computer prior to them reaching out to me, and when I installed Opera, I was kind of amazed at just how pretty everything looks. It's just very pleasing to look at. And, you know, my job is being on the computer all the time, so why would I want to do that on a browser that sucks the life out of me when I can do it in a place like this? It just makes mundane tasks more fun and more accessible. Opera improves workflow and productivity. You can keep different workspaces to stay organized, you can have island tabs to organize your tabs, and you can access their music player and messaging app without having to leave the screen that you're on. You can even access their AI tool, Aria, which is easily accessible in the sidebar and gives clear and concise answers at one time. So you don't have to spend as much time scouring the internet. Trust me, it did wonders for me when I was doing research for this video. If this is something that interests you, check out Opera in the link in the description, and thank you Opera for sponsoring this video. Now let's go back to the manosphere. The world in which inceldom resides is called the manosphere. Now I know a lot of you know what the manosphere is because you're chronically online, but for those of you that have a life, the manosphere is as stupid as it sounds. It's a small little world where men who believe they are victims live. They all come together, arm in arm, and sing fun little songs about society being gynocentric and how women have it easy. Maybe if you weren't also homophobic, you could just suck each other's dicks and call it a day. But I digress. Incels, of course, are the main characters of the manosphere. I mean, they have to be. It's a part of their victim mentality. Now, if you look to your left, we have the red pill, which, you know, is ripped right from the Matrix because they can't be original. But in the context of the manosphere, the red pill is recognizing, among others, that feminism is harmful to men. That men are the victims of a gynocentric world. Now, you might be saying, Saji, you keep saying this word gynocentric. What does it mean? What, that the world revolves around a giant ew? Gross. No. But it is probably what incels think feminists want, which is why they're so hell-bent on hating them. A gynocentric society is one which is dominated by or emphasizing feminine interests or a feminine point of view. Kind of like Ptolemy, you know, when he thought the Earth was the center of the universe, except more stupid and wrong. At least he was guessing. You have evidence at your disposal. Now, if you look to your right, we have the black pill. Oh, wait, that's my right. Fuck. Well, now if you look to your right, we have the black pill. The black pill is a belief made by incels that have no hope, that there is no way out of being an incel. While both red-pilled and black-pilled incels are unhappy with being involuntarily celibate, those that identify as red-pilled generally feel there are ways out of that status, while those that identify as black-pilled believe that their situation is permanent and inescapable. Now, they have fun names for everybody in society because it's their world and we're just living in it, literally and figuratively. As we walk further down the point of no return, you'll be able to see a dick-shaped totem pole, where at the tip you have the alpha males, whom I'm sure you're all aware of. These are the red pill, the fresh and fits, the Andrew Tates of the world. These are the guys that would have been incels, except they found a way to manipulate people into giving them money so that they could manipulate women into giving them sex. I would still consider alpha males incels, personally speaking, even though they aren't technically. They're just hiding behind their really tight button-ups and Dior Sauvage. Opposing alphas are, that's right, you guessed it, the betas, which weirdly are not the incels. You would think the opposite of an alpha would be what an incel is. But again, these incels have to be the main characters here. These betas or normies are men that can achieve sex, but won't be able to prevent their girlfriend from sleeping with a Chad. Oh, you thought this was a silly game? No. This is a well thought out science. It's foolproof. You see, that's why betas are betas, because sure, they can get a girlfriend, but that means that they could hypothetically be cheated on. Whereas I, incel, have no girlfriend, and therefore can't get cheated on, making you inferior to me. Now, what are Chads? Chads are the Mr. Steal Your Girl of the manosphere. They're the hunks, the football players, the frat guys. They are the incel's greatest enemy yet greatest desire at the same time. Just fuck already. Now, you're probably dying to know what the difference is between an alpha male and a Chad. It is a little confusing, but the differences are distinct. Let's hear from a pro-veteran incel, shall we? Chad, the dick, the body, the game, the waxed back and ass. He gets all the girls for one-nighters. Alpha, wears suits, smells good, stubble, is 6'3", earns money, has above average dick, but not as big as Chad, maybe even average. is older than Chad, so say Chad is 23, Alpha is 35. He has long-term relationships, strong, silent type. Then there's us. We have no redeeming qualities whatsoever. Thank you, pro-veteran incel. Now we're moving on to the last stop of the tour, the categories for women. Incels call women as a whole femoids, short for female humanoids or female humanoid organism, to belittle women as not only lesser than men, but also lesser than human. No wonder you can't get laid, you can't even acknowledge women as human. Then to further categorize the femoids, you have the Stacys and the Beckys. The Stacys are the female equivalent to Chads, but generally referred to more negatively than Chads are. Stacys are often characterized as beautiful, hyper-feminine, but dumb and promiscuous. Incels believe that Stacys will only go for Chads or Alphas. Beckys are considered less attractive than Stacys, but still unattainable for Incels. So Incels could only generalize the entirety of women into two categories: attractive and slightly less attractive, but still overall unattainable. Jesus Christ, you're just asking for it at this point. This misogynistic thinking in which incels operate is embedded into the very core of their being. And they don't hide it. Some abide by the rules of hypergamy, which is taken from animal biology and inaccurately applied to women. They believe that women will always seek relationships with men of higher status than themselves, or than the men they are currently with. Another insane generalization made by incels trying to rationalize why they're lonely. This is how dangerous the manosphere is, how dangerous of an echo chamber it can become. I don't care. Any explanation about the world around us that is easy to understand or defined by generalizations is untrue. Sociology is ever-changing as we humans evolve and adapt to the world around us. We are extremely complex individuals and cannot be contained by labels or categories. But that is not what the incel world believes. The incel world is black and white. Well, black, white, and brown. Oh my god, you have to make everything about race? Yes, because I forgot to mention, or left out intentionally in order to provide for a smoother segue, that there is another category for the brown incels. They are at the very bottom of the dick-shaped totem pole. They are the rejects of the incels. The rejects of the rejects. They are the curry cells, which is both self-degrading and self-applied, similar to the regular incel name. It sounds like a slur. I mean, it kind of technically is. The white incels have chosen derogatory names for all incels of color. Of course, the only safe space for lonely people is only a safe space for white lonely people. Yet they still feel safer inside this community than anywhere else in the outside world.
I think they're totally different and totally the same in a sense. There's a huge Venn diagram, and a lot of the things are kind of different equivalences. So in the case of an Indian man or an East Asian man, let's say, either of those, they exist in really different places in terms of like desirability politics. In terms of the desirability hierarchy, Asian men are often seen as effeminate, as ineffectual, not as very masculine, and Indian men are often seen as sort of perverted, as anti-masculine, as gross, as like, and these are because of like, you know, incredibly harmful racial stereotypes. And a lot of the stereotypes that apply to Indian men also apply to Middle Eastern men, Southeast Asian men, and you know, you can see that on the internet. You can see that on the internet very well. I'm sure we remember the Bob and Vagine meme, which was great. You know, just a whole meme around the idea that older Indian men will try to prey on white girls through DMs. You know, and it's not great for Indian people on social media a lot of the time. I know you've been called Vagine just like me. It's like, that's the only one you know?
I know.
I don't even look like that.
I'm not even the same hair at all.
Yeah, not even close. I think that sort of that aspect of it, that aspect of being very low on the desirability hierarchy, can put you in a totally different relationship to sex and intimacy. If you are an Indian man who is not, you know, Eurocentrically attractive, who has seen time and time again that people are willing to portray Indian men as perverted, as weird, as backwards, there's that, you know, very, I think, reasonable response to saying, like, dude, why the fuck does everybody hate Indian men so much? Yeah. Why do they feel so strongly that we are not sexually or romantically real or tenable?
And I have a whole video on this, but the prejudice towards Asians, South Asians, hell, any minority, increases these chances for these men to fall into these certain pitfalls. It makes this terrible, reclusive, insidious space look like the light at the end of the tunnel. But weirdly, Indian incels are considered the lowest of the low within the incel community. Indians are seen as particularly lacking in sex appeal, We're the lowest of the low, he explains. I've seen posts about how being an incel in India is normal, that most men are incels there, so it doesn't count. So why stay? Why be a part of this community that treats you no differently than the rest of society? Well, the incel parasite tempts with such a false aura of comfort and safety that incels of color would rather choose that cruel world over any other. Sure, they're racist, but at least they can relate to your biggest insecurity. Still, Sharma has no plans about his fellow incels. Not me. Completely different Sharma. It's not me. No matter how racist they might be, he believes that, relatively speaking, being considered a curry isn't the worst thing in the world. Especially when he considers that the incel community is the only place where my feelings about myself and relationships with women make sense. So, while Sharma says, not me, that the white incels are ignorant about the world, I know that we're feeling the same things, and that's all that matters. So this Stockholm Syndrome relationship shows that these brown incels are really, in their mind, just picking the lesser of the two evils. But what if there's more than two evils? What if there's 3 or 4 even? What are you gonna do about it? Huh? Well, racism isn't the only factor as to why it's easier to slip into the rabbit hole. We have to consider societal factors that have been embedded into South Asians from growing up in their home country. Coming from a place with such a dense patriarchal system that prioritizes men to certain extremes can be a culture shock when moving to the West.
Even if they grew up in the West, right? For example, it's not like, so a lot of, brown people in the, West, they have parents that were either immigrants, right? Or the values are very different than, for example, a white person for a brown person, right? So there's already a lot of, how do I say this, misogyny in our cultural, system. Like it's just very cultural, the way these things happen, right? So now for example, your mom has raised you into thinking that you're superior, like you're a boy, you're superior, versus your sister, who's doing all the house chores and all the, are forced to do it. You know what I mean? Like she's having to clean or, even studying, right? Like, for example, like studying is so much more important for the boy. It's so much less important for the girl because a girl just has to grow up and get married. And that's basically what she's good for. But a guy has to go out and earn and do all these things, blah, blah, blah. It's like all these, just patriarchal systems, essentially. I don't know how else to even say this. And a lot of it does come from these cultural elements, right? So now you come into the real world, right? And then all of a sudden, you're seeing, women, like you're very different than, for example, your mom. You know what I mean? Like women don't want to be stuck in these traditional gender roles anymore. We're going out and we're studying. We're, having really, good jobs and we're progressing and things like that. You know what I mean? So all of a sudden, it's like a big clash for you. You know what I mean? Like it's very different for you to see yourself now as that king of the, he's like my prince. And, he's like, oh, like for the mom, you know what I mean?
I got you.
Yeah. There's that cultural element, and that's very much exacerbating some of the feelings that maybe a brown incel would be feeling, because it's like a big clash versus what a white, incel might be feeling, which is societal and dating and all this stuff. On the other hand, so when this brown incel is now going out in high school, and there's this whole element of colorism, involved in this, right? Because in our culture, the fairer your skin, the more beautiful you're considered, And so for you, maybe you're a brown guy that wants to date or, wants a relationship with a white girl because you think that she is a lot more attractive, just based on colorism and all these things that exist in our culture. Okay, well, she might not feel that same way about you because she maybe doesn't view. It's just a whole freaking thing on racism and how you're viewed, and there's all, So I think it's harder because it's like a lot of different, like multi-variable sort of a thing going on where you have this racism, colorism, cultural, and then the manosphere ideology, like everything's just sort of collapsing when you're going into the real world.
Yeah. And it's hard to understand how drastic this change of life can be. So to help put India's conservatism and traditionalism into perspective for you, I want to take a look at India's men's rights movement. Now, America has a very conservative half that is tied to traditionalism. Make America Great Again is a cry to bring back tradition. In India, that traditionalism isn't very different. In fact, it's more intense. That's why if you've ever had Indian friends in school, you've noticed that they don't really hang out with you outside of school. That is due to the traditionalism of Indian parents. Yeah, no friends, no fun. Love you, Mom and Dad. I know you guys are watching this video. But the country that they come from behaves differently than the more progressive country that they currently inhabit. And because the more run-of-the-mill societal structures of their home country tends to be more conservative, that inherently means that the stuff that we view as more extreme is going to be more extreme there as well. India's men's rights movement is an inspiration for pro-men organizations everywhere. In fact, they foam at the mouth. Paul Elam, a sworn anti-gynocentrist. I love how that's in quotations, because what does that mean? What, that he doesn't want the world to revolve around a giant pretty immature of you, Paul. And champion of the Americans' men's rights movement demurred that he was a student that afternoon. You guys are light years ahead of us, he boomed. The Indian movement is setting an example for the whole world. Unlike the American MRM, men's rights activists in India are viewed as fairly legitimate. And you may be wondering, what's making the India's men's rights movement so prevalent? Maybe they face actual discrimination. Yeah, like not being able to harm women. I'm not joking. What began in the early 2000s as a series of local support groups for aggrieved husbands fighting the supposed misuse of a law that protected Indian women from dowry-related crimes has grown into a network of men's rights groups with the basic anatomy of a political movement. Dowry is payment made in cash or kind to a bride's in-laws at the time of her marriage. Now, dowry has been illegal in India since 1961, but it's still pretty prevalent, and it is a part of India's tradition. And in 1983, Section 498A of the Indian Penal Code was created to protect women from harassment, abuse, and violence in cases where a bride's family did not provide a sufficient dowry. MRAs saw this as giving women too much power and lobbied to change the law. In 2014, the Indian Supreme Court took their side and removed the automatic arrest provision, purportedly to protect men against disgruntled wives. That is how normalized India's conservatism is, and that's just an example of it. There are plenty of other facets, like colorism, Hindu nationalism, workers' rights, and poverty. But let's not forget that British colonialism and loss of sovereignty and political power is the reason why Hindu revivalism and nationalism and tradition run so rampant in the country of India. Not an excuse, but a reason. But that's the world that these immigrants are coming from, whether they side with it or not. They're used to a more traditional way of thinking, and that affects how they raise their children. And most of the time, confidence is reliant on how people perceive you. And if people perceive you as a pervy, stinky weirdo, rather than the beautiful brown boy like what your mother tells you, then your confidence is going to be hurt a little bit. If you're a person of color that grew up in the United States of America or anywhere in the West, it's likely that you've had your ego checked by a white person you've really liked. All we saw in the media growing up was white people, white people, white people. So it's normal for your cognitive functioning to go, oh, I like white people. I like the people with the standards of European beauty. However, white people have that same perspective. Obviously, they're white. All of the love interests that they watched in media as well were white people. So it's normal for their cognitive functioning to go, oh, I like white people, which is unfortunate for you because you are not white. As much as you want to be, it's just not going to happen, pal. Sorry, she said no to homecoming. She's just going to go with an uglier white dude. Sorry, that's just how it works. Now, what does all of this have to do with Avaneesh? Well, with this newfound information from your favorite YouTuber, Saji Sharma, it's a little bit easier to understand the nuances as to why this young brown man and young brown men like him have so much hate in their heart. In Avaneesh, you can see that these Western beauty standards are simultaneously diminishing his own self-esteem, and then in turn raising his standards in a partner to the whiteness that he wants to see in himself. This goes a lot deeper than homecoming, my friends. You can also see the loneliness of inceldom. No, because I'm shocked that no female has ever had a crush on me. Not even one. As well as an internalized racism issue, which weirdly boosts his confidence, but then he's okay to turn it around and be misogynistic to Indian women. Okay, so he has the typical incel misogynistic worldview. But there was one thing that I noticed that makes him stand out. One factor stopping him from being a full-fledged incel. Confidence. He has confidence. Avaneesh has the confidence of a professional pickup artist. And it's not something a lot of incels have. In fact, the lack of confidence is what make incels incels. So what is giving him this ego? Well, I can tell you. It's his platform. On its own, inceldom behavior online is very common. And it makes sense. The internet is the breeding ground for incels, so it's natural that they are a part of the online world. But things can take a turn, and there can be extreme cases of inceldom in real life.
When it comes to people who escalate, into real life hate crimes and harassment and assault, that is, very different from online harassment. But even so, it's still an extension, right, of that internet behavior. And it's kind of why we view stuff that happens on the internet as warning signs. as threats of possible escalation, because we've seen instances of, people talking shit on the internet, being creepy on the internet, really escalate into horrific hate crime, murder, stalking, assault. I think when it gets to that point, when it escalates, it's difficult to say, because on one hand, I believe that, everybody has a chance at not doing ridiculous, horrible things.
Yeah.
Everybody has a chance at rehabilitation. Everybody has a chance at, preventative measures to stop them from becoming this type of person. But on the other hand, I think that if you are somebody who goes and commits a terror attack from an incel forum, to an extent, you had some of those ideas before. That's not to say that, somebody can't be radicalized fully from not believing it at all to becoming a criminal because of this stuff. They totally can. But I think in the case, in some of these cases, there's a sense of like the incel community is both attracting antisocial people who want answers and antisocial people who want a reason to commit violence. And, you have a community made up of a bunch of different people who are all uniting under this violent ideology towards women. Of course, it's going to grow into real-life harassment and violence, whether the perpetrators are people who didn't believe they were going to do that or who wanted to do that the whole time. It's not obvious how important that is. It's just that internet community, if it's, it's like Kiwi Farms or 4chan, if these people are doxing trans people or doxing women, swatting LGBTQ plus people, that's essentially already real life harassment, and that's going to grow. That's going to turn into real life death threats, real life, people showing up at your house.
There probably is a huge difference between online versus in real life, because I feel like everything is so just dramatized online. You know what I mean? Like, it's totally. It's sort of like it's easier for people to come out of their shells and sort of comment when they're behind the mask of like an anonymous profile. It's easy to like, participate in like a manosphere sort of an environment where you don't, like, nobody really knows who you are. And it's sort of like everything's hidden and anonymous. And so, I definitely think that, I think some of it will translate definitely into real life, because, we hear about attacks and all this crazy stuff. And I have some experiences as well. So like, it's not like there's definitely a real life element to it. But I just wonder how much of these incels are actually just like keyboard warriors, and just like it's easy for them to just be themselves.
Totally.
Online behind like a hidden screen versus, actually, being in person and like attacking people and,
Now, Avaneesh has followed that trajectory from online to real life harassment. He has allegedly harassed multiple women on college campuses. But that trajectory was different than the typical incel because of his circumstances. The incels that we've talked about are, the average Reddit user, people that tend to hide behind their online anonymity. But Avaneesh is an outlier. His whole shtick is being upfront about his incel-ass takes. That's why he got famous, because most people would be afraid of the backlash that would be a result of that. But not Avaneesh. No, that backlash feeds his ego. The confidence boost from having a following is keeping Avaneesh from being a full-fledged incel. And I think it's more dangerous and makes him more prone to extreme behavior. In my most recent Avaneesh video, I talked a lot about people harassing him in TikTok lives.
He thinks he's lighter than me. I am.
Why is your skin lighter than your teeth, bro?
That's a good thing. I'm naturally light-skinned. Oh, you like Asians too? You're sitting under the brightest light ever and trying to look lighter than me, and you're still not lighter than me.
It's like yellow light, bro. Oh,
he does.
What's its name? Were
you there when that happened?
What's its name?
How do you know?
Can someone explain why he's doing this?
He's fucking sped.
I think they're good, but like, you're really mentally ill.
And I got some comments saying it's warranted considering all of the bad things Avaneesh has said and done. But I have to disagree. In these TikTok lives, other brown creators and sometimes just random people would bully and demean Avaneesh for how he looks and how he acts. This type of behavior is not constructive. It doesn't help anyone. And I'm not excusing Avaneesh's behavior. I'm not saying that these creators are the reason that he harasses people. Avaneesh is absolutely at fault fault for all of his actions. But these people think they're better than Avaneesh, and that mindset will only make him angrier and feel less accepted. Now, it would be different if these mainly men called him out for his actions, instead of belittling him for how he acts in his everyday life and how he looks. I did state this in my other video, but I want to emphasize again that I think pointing out and making fun of people for their inappropriate actions rather than something they can't control is absolutely warranted. I do it all the time. I did it with Avaneesh because it calls attention to the errors that were made. And on top of that, people are capable of change. That's why it's so important to call attention to these errors. The rehabilitation systems in our society are deeply flawed, but I would rather try to talk someone into changing than pushing them further into the pitfalls that they're in.
I think that rehabilitation in relation to hate crimes and sexual crimes is very, very slippery. I think what people need to understand is the demographic, right, of people who are truly morally uninhibited and who feel that they want to inflict terror and harm and hate and violence onto other people unprovoked for the rest of their life, no matter what. That demographic of people is incredibly small, right? They're so small that whenever one of them comes to our attention, they're like a cultural figure for decades. You know, Ted Bundy.
Yeah.
These people aren't just like walking around. And I'm of the opinion that probably a lot of incels and a lot of people who commit hate crimes and things like this are not people who are, you know, like literally incapable of, you know, withholding violent urges. Because of that, I think, you know, a lot of these people probably are capable of rehabilitation, whatever that looks like. I'm not a rehabilitative expert when it comes to these offenses, and especially because, you know, I'm a trans woman of color. If these people are being rehabilitated, I'd rather it wasn't around me.
Yeah, no, totally.
I think that's okay. And I think, you know, just because somebody is rehabilitated, it doesn't mean that you need to absolve them of their wrongdoings. And it doesn't mean that you have to invite them into your life if they have harmed you explicitly, if they have harmed somebody who is close to you, if they have harmed somebody who looks like you or identifies like you. I think that rehabilitation is a totally viable process for a lot of people. But I think that people confuse the idea of rehabilitation with just reintegration into the community that they've harmed, reintegration into the relationships that they've harmed. And ultimately rehabilitation is like that personal process of, you know, growing, understanding exactly what you've done wrong, who you've harmed, you know, what you need to do to grow and become better. And that process, you know, just like any other process of self-growth, probably shouldn't be done just to reconnect with people that you've harmed. You know, rehabilitation shouldn't be this thing where it's like, oh, let me try to gain back the approval and trust of a community. You know, if a YouTuber, say, like, does something fucked up, right, or misuses their power platform, you know, and they go through a process of rehabilitation just to regain their audience.
Yeah.
You know, it feels insincere. It's you know, this thing where it's like, oh, I've been learning and growing, and I'm ready to come back and make content and do my job. You know, it feels like they're not doing it, you know, for a personal sense of growth. It feels like they're doing it so that they can return back to this sort of social circle that they frequented. And I think that, you know, emphasis on rehabilitation is this, you know, really, really this upheaval of like who you were as a person, and this really intense need to change and to work with other people to change is important, but also emphasis on the fact that, like, this doesn't mean that you get to go and hang out with the people that you fucked over. Totally. Is also important. Yeah.
Now, as much as I want this video to be for young men growing and learning new things about the world, or even for men who have started to fall into these pitfalls of inceldom, I also want this video to be helpful and insightful for the women who are on the receiving end of the majority of this incel vitriol and disgusting misogyny. So I asked Yusra and Rose to give some of their personal advice to any women that have gone through or are going through harassment from incels online or in real life.
So there's two things. First, don't stay quiet. You know, and then second, because of the trauma, you know, work through that trauma. You know, those are the two that I would say. So to go into the first one in more detail, I think a lot of women are scared. You know, they're very worried about, you know, if they report something that's happening to them, or if there's like, if someone, you know, is doing something to them and they speak their name, that how much worse is it gonna be for them, you know? Like, is this person gonna attack them more? Are they gonna harass them more? What if no one takes them seriously? What if they report something and it just angers the harasser even more, and then he doesn't have to pay for any consequence, you know what I mean? So I think in all those situations and feelings and things like that, like, I would say, don't stay quiet. Tell your friends, tell your family, report somebody if they need to be reported. You know what I mean? Like, I just don't think that it's something that any girl or woman should just have to deal with internally. Fear is a very difficult thing to process, you know. Absolutely. So definitely talk to people and don't just deal with it yourself. Like, have a community that can help work through this with you. And then, of course, the second thing, of course, is just, it goes right into piggybacking off of talking, right? Like, make sure that you work through your issues, because not all men are crazy, not all men are incels, not all men are horrible people, you know what I mean? So, work through your issues, get therapy, resolve them and things like that, so that, one negative experience doesn't affect your worldview, for the rest of your life. Because, like I said, I've met some great people, but I also had this crazy incel experience too, but it doesn't mean that I hate men. I love men, it's like there are, a lot of great ones out there. But again, if you've gone through crazy things, like, it will obviously affect how you view them and how you view incels and how you view the world. So
totally.
So work through whatever you need to. Yeah.
It's serious. It's, take it seriously, treat it as harassment. If other people aren't validating the seriousness of the situation, don't let them gaslight you out of believing that what's happening to you is unjust and misogynistic and incredibly detrimental to your mental health. It's really hard to get yourself out of harassment campaigns. I guess, like, don't respond to them, maybe. That's the only way I've ever sort of, if I've ever had Twitter beef, which it's been a long time. Yeah. I just went private and I didn't respond to the people. I just used the tweet nuke or whatever it's called, where you can block everybody, not only the person, but everybody who liked and retweeted that tweet.
Oh, I didn't know you could do that.
Nuke them. I did that with Billie Eilish fans who were harassing me at one point. That was pretty funny. But yeah, I guess my main piece of advice is, like, if you're experiencing harassment online, don't let people invalidate that harassment, and make sure that the people around you, as well as your audience, and they understand that it's a serious thing and that it should not be taken lightly, and try to make sure that I don't know, it's really hard. I don't have any advice on, like, how to stay safe. Maybe use a VPN. I'm not sure.
That's fine.
But law enforcement doesn't take this stuff seriously, and law enforcement generally sucks. So I don't know, terms of service and often really terrible for this type of stuff as well. The accounts don't get banned. It's really like a lose-lose situation, and all I can recommend is, like, fucking block these people on site, try to eliminate them, like, don't give them any attention, don't give them any ins, try to, like, literally, like, as soon as you see them, pull the weed out of the root, try to get them out of your comments, out of your community, and try to make sure, if the harassment continues, that people around you and in your audience know that it's serious and this person is, like, fucking with your mental health.
Please make sure you check out both of those people. They're great, wonderful people, and I couldn't have made this video without them. Well, that's going to wrap things up, finally. That was a very long video. But if you made it this far, comment, "Mama, I made it to the end of one of Saji's videos." I'm going to put that on a t-shirt and make it merch. Comment, "I would buy," if you would buy. Also, me and my friends are in a band and are releasing our first single ever on January 31st. The pre-save link is in the description. If you're interested, we make alt-rock music. Pretty fucking sick. Thank you, Opera, for sponsoring this video, and thank you, my patrons, for supporting the channel. Check out the Patreon if you want extra content. You get videos early, and I'm a lot nicer over there. And you also get a shout out at the end of all my videos, like right now.